And this month's Where Did the Road Go is sponsored by Super Inframan, Allison Cook, and Eric Hervin. Thank you all so very much for your incredible support.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Seriah.
Welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go? And tonight I am joined by Christopher, Ernst, and Red Pill Junkie.
Thank you for having me and us.
Yes. Welcome to the party.
So we're just going to do a wandering the road sort of roundtable tonight. You guys were having a conversation in Slack that was pretty interesting, and that's kind of why I wanted to do this. But I'm not really sure where to start. Should we start with Travis?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Okay. So one of my inputs. So Travis Walton's an interesting case because I don't think there's any evidence that he's faking anything. Like, whatever happened to him, something genuinely happened to him. And I think it's one of the few cases that's not severely muddied, like most of the other ones. But my feeling is he may have encountered a ball of plasma that zapped him, discharged into him. And if you take that much of electricity in, you're not going to make short-term memories for a while. So it would explain his absence. The distance he walked is not beyond the capability of him getting there in that time period. It's just a theory. Like, I'm not saying that's definitely what happened to him, but that's my thoughts. And you had some comments on that, Red Pill.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's certainly an interesting idea. And Travis has mentioned that particular area where he had his experience seems to have the highest incidence of lightning strikes in the whole continental United States, which is also, particularly interesting.
Yeah.
But I don't know, there's a couple of things that we need to take into account. Number one is that there were 6 other witnesses to his experience, and I think that all those guys agree that they saw what appeared to be a disc-shaped object that was hovering in the air, and it wasn't silence. It was kind of like a certain type of mechanical humming that increased in pitch and intensity once Travis was full enough to kind of like get it closer. He bolted out of the pickup truck and got closer to the object. That part of the story almost kind of makes me think that maybe there was some kind of like maybe he was induced by someone or something to get out of the truck. The same way that abductees claim that sometimes they're not in control of their faculties, or they have this compulsion to get on their car in the middle of the night and go to these desolate areas where they, allegedly get abducted by aliens or whatnot. But getting back to the story and this idea, this hypothesis that he was struck by ball lightning. Apparently, when he was found, I don't think there were any indications that his clothes had any kind of burning marks, especially in the chest area where allegedly he was zapped by the beam of the object. I don't think there were also any indications of having him 2nd or 3rd degree burnings in his skin and his body, which I think would have been consistent with a lightning strike. And lastly, I mean, let's not forget that the guy was lost for 5 days, and the guys actually returned to that very place that same night, and they couldn't find him. Maybe they were in shock. Maybe they weren't looked closely enough. Maybe he was like buried or hidden by some, underbrush, whatever. so, like I said, like you said, this is one of the classic cases of ufology, and the fact that Travis has been around for so long, it speaks to the fact that pretty much everybody in the UFO field finds him credible.
Yeah.
The only people who didn't find him credible were the skeptics. And one of the things that Travis was saying in the Joe Rogan interview is that someone had actually attempted to bribe one of the witnesses $10,000 if they were to change the story and say that they had made it all up and it was all a lie. Yeah. Apparently, that person was Philip Klass, the famous, uber skeptic.
And I think that was mentioned in the documentary too.
Yeah.
Travis.
Yeah.
And Travis seems to be of the impression that Philip was acting under the orders of another intelligence agency, plus possibly the CIA. I'm not sure about that, but I do think that Philip Klass had some kind of FBI file that I think that because of his work at the Aviation Weekly magazine, that maybe possibly someone did a search on him to see if he wasn't selling or divulging classified information to foreign assets.
Right.
Because that's what you will do. You say, okay, this guy writes about secret Air Force projects. We better check him out. And maybe he actually, crossed the line a few times, and maybe that's one of the reasons why he might have gotten under the thumb of a government agency. But going so far and said, oh yeah, he was a government agent. I think that even Stan Friedman accused him at one point of being part of the Majestic 12 or something like that. I don't know. Maybe I'm talking out of my head here, but yeah, surely people like Philip Klass were the ones who were accusing Travis from the very beginning of either lying, of having been under the influence of LSD, or some other cacamamie story. But so far, I feel Travis Walton's story has stood the test of time.
Yeah, well, when you're talking about what they saw, plasma can actually look like metal. I think it's Andrew Collins who did the work on this with his Light Quest book. Like, what people see as UFOs, saucers, and stuff like this, these are plasma formations that can happen. So that's not, because we're not talking about just normal ball lightning. We're talking about actual plasma, which ball lightning might be a form of.
Sure.
And then you were also mentioning, Seriah, you were postulating, rather, the idea of living plasma.
Yes.
Right?
And
yes.
well, that comes from Andrew Collins. That's his theory, that these things are intelligent plasma, and that basically when they get in close proximity to us, they create sort of a bubble universe where we can interact.
Mm. Mm.
It's a decent theory. It's currently unprovable, but it does account for everything.
Yeah, I had run across something that was from Massimo Teodoro. I'm just, how do I spell it? Teodorani, Massimo Teodorani, Dr. Massimo Teodorani, who is a physicist, and he wrote this book called The Hyperspace of Consciousness. He had been on, I think he'd been on at least once on Greg Bishop's Radio Misterioso with his wife, Susan Demeter, who is also, has her own work that she does in occult and consciousness. And are you friends with them, Red Pill? I don't know. Or do you know them?
Yeah, I actually sent him a little questionnaire that I used for an article that I published this evening.
Right. So you might know something about this too, and want to chime in. But essentially, it reminded me when you spoke about that, Seriah, of this article that I had read, or an excerpt rather, from his book, The Hyperspace of Consciousness, where he talks about a hypothesis for intelligent plasma, which really sort of, if I remember it correctly, it comes from he essentially is building on David Bohm's the first sort of theoretical physics studies with plasma. Yeah. And then he's essentially stating that because of the behavior of plasma and the way that it sort of works, the microtubules work as this cooperative entity, kind of like described, I guess, by only one wave function is how he says it. They're working in unison. That give rise to the emergence of consciousness? And he sort of goes into that. I forget some of the details that he goes in from there. But he's essentially coming up with, an idea of how the plasma crystals could, evolve sort of a double helix sort of shape that's identical to DNA and sort of take on these evolutionary characteristics, which is interesting.
That is interesting.
A few scientists who have proposed similar ideas, and they have looked into the structure of plasma, which is basically ionized gas, electrified gas, and they see that it has particular properties that are similar to the way that nerve cells are structured and are organized, and say, well, maybe you could use this, the structural organization of plasma the same way that nerves organize themselves in order to create the equivalent of neural networks and in order to create what you will say consciousness. Well, obviously there are issues that I feel has to be solved with these ideas, and I have to admit I've never read Massimo's book. I think it's out of print, actually, the Hyperspace of Consciousness. But the problem is that we know that plasma tends to be very, very short-lived, like lasting just a matter of minutes, if not seconds. And the other one is that because of, the purposes of our planet, the gravity and whatnot, you cannot have plasma structures that are too big. The sun is basically a plasma structure, but because of its huge gravity, is that it retains its structure. Otherwise, it will dissipate, very quickly. And that's a problem that scientists are working on trying to come up with sustainable nuclear fusion reactors. They have to find ways to contravene or counter for the lack of gravity in our planet, and that's why they have to use these very powerful magnetic fields in order to contain the plasma. So, to me, that's one of the things that I'll probably raise before jumping into the intelligent plasma bandwagon here, which I still find incredibly interesting, and maybe it will be a way to solve the problem of the soul. If we humans have one, maybe that would be a way to try to come up with a rational, scientific-based explanation for the soul. But I think we need to find this. Otherwise, we need to fully solve this. Otherwise, we fall the risk of trying to solve one unknown with another unknown.
Sure. I raise it as a possibility. I don't think he encountered an extraterrestrial craft. I think he encountered whatever this thing was. It was a real experience. But I would lean more toward intelligent plasma versus ETs at this point. Ren's take on it was kind of interesting. He said that he encountered some kind of natural electrical phenomena that nearly killed him, explaining the UFO and the arc of electricity and Travis's abduction experience, which more closely paralleled a trip to fairyland or the underworld, was had in a near-death experience or out-of-body state while he was unconscious.
Well, yeah, even Dr. Hynek himself, and you can actually find in the Radio Misterioso archives, there's a 4-part like recording that QFOS released. It was kind of like an album they released, which has, among other things, an interview with Travis Walton back when he was like still a young man. This was released in 1978, and his experience happened in 1976. So you can hear him, actually talking and describing the experience, and Hynek like chiming in and giving his expert opinion and saying how he always approached the Walton case as a 2-part story. One story is the one that was corroborated by the other witnesses who saw the object, whatever it was,
right.
Who saw Travis getting zapped by it. They ran in terror. They returned. They didn't find him. And the fact that the authorities tried their best to find him, they're like using dogs, using volunteers. I think they even did, I don't know, maybe federal authorities got involved. And they couldn't find him until he was located 5 days later in a different town.
Right.
And the other part is obviously the account of what might have transpired inside this object, how Travis woke up all groggy and saw these kind of like almost the typical gray entities that he lashed out at them, trying to use what seemed to be like a clear cylinder, maybe made out of plastic or glass, although he couldn't break it, and how he escaped them. And then one part of the incident that he forgot to mention to Rogan is the part about going into a room where there was a chair, and when he got closer to the chair, the room got darker, and he saw what appeared to be stars, kind of like a 3D virtual reality scenario, and he touched a few buttons in this chair, and the stars started to move away, and he got really scared and said, "Man, maybe if I'm in space, I'm gonna crash this thing," which kind of like sounds ridiculous in the idea of you're dealing with very advanced beings. How do you let this little monkey that you captured like take control of your ride? It doesn't make any sense at all. Like, do you have a password or something before someone sits in the command chair and goes to Alpha Centauri without permission? I don't know. But yeah, that's the story nobody can corroborate.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but he also saw humans in this, didn't he?
Yeah, he saw a couple of humans with long hair. I guess you will say the typical blondes, although they weren't wearing the robes as some people describe sometimes. Right. No, they were wearing tight-fitting, like blue suits, almost like diving suits. And the guy who took him out of the craft, he was actually wearing some kind of like a Buck Rogers fishbowl helmet, and they didn't exchange any words at all, which is interesting because, like Mike Levin said, it's like a truism in UFO lore, the idea that these beings can communicate telepathically.
Yeah.
For some reason, this wasn't the case at all. That's just, I guess, with Walton, we haven't reached that stage in the UFO abduction mythology, the idea that the beings could control the abductee to such a degree that they wouldn't be able to move a muscle, and they will also be like sending messages into their heads, like, "Do not be afraid, we're not going to harm you," whatever. But yeah, he saw what he seemed to be perfectly looking human entities, and that's also something that obviously was cut out of the cinematic rendition of his account, which is the movie Fire Guy, right?
And didn't he see those? He saw them if I remember the narrative correctly or the timeline, at first he saw like the grays, quote unquote, and then it was he saw the quote unquote humans afterwards. They were sort of brought to him because he was freaking out. Am I correct on that?
I think that the first human-looking entity, the one with the clear helmet, came to pick him up when he was still messing around with a chair, and that the one who took his arm and gently escorted him out of the craft into what looked like some kind of like big hangar.
Yeah.
You know? And to this day, he doesn't know whether he was like in a mothership or it was in a base or whatever. He just saw that it was a very big space that contained other types of craft that were parked near the one that he got out of. And that's when he was escorted to this place where there were other entities, including one that looked like to be a female, and that the female was the one that put some kind of like clear mask into his mouth that knocked him very rapidly.
Right, that's the one I'm thinking of. Yeah. I admit that I fell asleep during the Rogan interview listening to it. I got the first part of it, so I wasn't refreshed on it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't blame you. If you listen to Travis' account before, you're probably not gonna get a lot of new information. Although he did like throw up a few new interesting tidbits. For example, he says that, and I actually haven't finished listening to it because that's what I do. I listen to a few minutes. I take breaks. I take notes. I do other things. I absorb the content. But one of the things he said is that he's found out that his real father, his biological father, I guess, used to work for MIT as a mathematician in the Apollo program.
Right. I think I did catch that. Yeah. So that is interesting.
If I remember right, he didn't see actual grays. He saw something that sort of resembled what we consider grays now.
Right. They were like short creatures, but they didn't have like the normal gray sort of spindly. I think they might have been more thick, heavy set.
Yeah, almost gnomish.
Right.
They described him to be 4 foot tall. And like I said, you can actually in this recording that I mentioned, you can actually listen to a small like 45-second segment of hypnosis, and he like the therapist is trying to coax him to describe the beings in a very subtle way. I don't think he was leading at all. He's saying, you can describe what you saw and it won't bother me, and you can describe what the being looked like and it won't bother me. And Travis is saying under hypnosis, he's ugly and I kind of read, and his eyes, he looks Chinese, and his big eyes, and he almost says at the ending of that segment, only horses have eyes like that, which I found interesting. So the eyes didn't seem to be like totally black, or maybe weren't totally black. Maybe they were like the same way that the eyes of horses, kind of like different.
And of course, the fact that he recovered this stuff under hypnosis immediately raises red flags to me.
Of course.
And when I talked to him, because I was at the Travis premiere when they premiered it in Ithaca, and I interviewed him. I tried to get out of him like, what did you remember about the experience prior to hypnosis? And he would not answer the question. And I don't know if it's because he doesn't know. But I genuinely want to know, like, how much of this experience did he remember prior to hypnosis? Because that's interesting to me. Like, if he remembered a chunk of it first and then hypnosis added to it, that's fine. At least we have that first chunk that wasn't touched by hypnosis.
I think the reason why he couldn't answer your question, Seriah, is because he doesn't really know how long it took for his brother and his family to follow the advice of the investigators to take him to see a hypnotherapist right away. But it seems that it was a matter of days. And during the intern, he claims to have been in a state of mental shock.
Yeah.
So, and he doesn't seem to regret having gone under the hypnosis regression, because he says that the hypnosis really helped him to calm down, to relax him, almost like to try to cope with the trauma that the experience brought to him. But yeah, it's not like, oh yeah, and he went to see the hypnotist like 2 or 3 months later. No, I think it was a matter of days, because the APRO guys told his family, you need to, go take him to see this guy right away. And I guess the family did that because they thought, well, these are the experts. We better do what they say.
Sure.
Now he said that one thing I do remember from the interview was that he said that he went to the same hypnotist who worked with Betty Hill. And was that Webb? I'm trying to remember the names of because Betty Hill worked with several hypnotists, didn't she?
Well, or maybe I'm wrong, because Betty Hill went with his husband, Dr. Benjamin Simon, who was
Benjamin Simon, right? Yeah,
was an expert in trying to help army veterans to try to cope with what we now will call post-traumatic stress disorder. That was his specialty, and that's the reason why Betty and Barney went to him. And obviously, Simon's primal concern wasn't to try to extract the truth about the UFO experience. Actually, he never believed in the account himself. He just wanted to try to release his patients from the stress they were under. That was as a therapist, that was his main concern, and I think he was very much right in doing that, instead of trying to extract information.
I mean, hypnosis is a good behavior modification tool. There's no doubt about it.
Right.
And that was one of the things Travis said, that it helped him, the hypnosis helped him, relax. But the fact that the memories were then recovered still in the hypnotic state is a problem. Like if it had helped him deal with it and then he remembered the stuff spontaneously, that would be a lot more valuable to us now.
Yeah, and I don't think to have the name of the guy who regressed him here on my notes. I do know that I tried to check him out later on the internet. I Googled his name, and I don't think he was actually a professional psychiatrist. I think he was like an engineer who was interested in UFOs. He was a member of APRO, and I guess he took hypnosis lessons, and this is the guy who regressed him. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think that's what I found, that the guy who first regressed Travis Walton wasn't a professional psychiatrist.
Oh, that's even worse.
I know.
Yeah, I mean, it does stand out as one of those cases that, unlike, say Rendlesham or Roswell, where there's so much nonsense added into it after the fact that it's just become a mess, Travis is one of the cases that's not happened with.
Yeah.
It may be one of the only big cases that's not happened with.
That's true. I mean, beyond whatever is sort of, and not that the film is wildly different. There are some significant differences, but I think that's the only thing that sort of has created an alternative narrative, and muddied the waters to some degree. It doesn't deviate that much, even by his own admission.
Unlike Communion.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the other thing we were talking about right before we started, we were talking about the way that people will find papers and stuff, like, oh, the U.S. government had this idea, listed out as a possible thing to do, and people, like, when they find those things, they jump on them. They're like, look at this, look what they did, versus, oh, look, someone proposed this idea.
Mm-hmm.
And you were giving some examples, Red Pill.
Right, like there's an article by Greg Taylor on the Daily Grail about how the U.S. government or someone in the U.S. government proposed once as an experiment the idea of using nuclear weapons to slow the rotation of the Earth. Almost like the reverse of what Superman does in the first movie when he's trying to save Lois Lane.
Yes.
So, but there was a UFO one there too, wasn't there?
Yeah, like right now, Brett Tingley, who is a wonderful writer and he's contributes to The Drive, he's been releasing all these articles with relation to this guy, Dr. Salvatore Cesar Pais. So this is a guy who used to work for a branch of the Navy, like as a branch dedicated to cutting edge research, and he's the one who's been asking for patents for all these devices that he's come up with, including one that is, for all intents and purposes, a flying saucer. Will be like a craft able to traverse at great speeds, both on land or on water and on the air, using some kind of like highly charged electromagnetic field that will negate the friction, mm-hmm. and other ideas that will pretty much, if those ideas were true, the United States will dominate the energy market for the next 2 or 3 centuries. Mm-hmm. Because this guy, I remember one of the patents he was asking for was for ambient room or level, or what you call a level room. What is the name of this superconductor? And if you have that, if you have a superconductor that doesn't have to be chilled to almost below freezing temperatures,
right,
you pretty much can have like levitating trains, and you can have great advances in the terms of distributing energy without the problems that we now have with materials that are not really good at conducting electricity. So this guy has all these patents, and Brett Tingley has now released another article saying how the Navy actually performed a few experiments to try to prove these guys' theories, and they actually went and conduct these experiments, and they spent a couple $100,000, and it seems that they didn't find anything that we know of. Right. So you will say, well, okay, so these guys' idea have been proven to be false. So why is it that the Navy asked the U.S. Patent Office to grant this guy all these patents, alluding that the America's enemies, the Chinese to be specific, were actually conducting research on those same fields, and that's why the patent needed to be granted in order to keep an advantage on these foreign assets. And to me, I don't really know how to go with this story. On the one hand, it's obvious that the U.S. government needs or has conducted experiments or research in areas that may not yield any fruit at all, and that's fine. I mean, someone needs to conduct experiments in areas that are unlikely, especially in the fields of pure research, because the private sector is probably not going to do it. Private sector only wants to have immediate gains,
right?
So not going to do a lot of research in pie in the sky areas, right?
Yeah.
So someone has to do it, and that someone will have to be governments. So I don't see any problem with that. But I wonder if the thing with this guy is that it was some kind of like ruse in order to confuse the Chinese and to them to go and spend a couple million yuan in trying to replicate these experiments, with the Americans knowing fully well that it was at the end. It was basically like a trap. So that's my idea.
I mean, with any of this stuff, it's so hard to weed out what is like disinformation, what's like the government just it's so insidiously involved in everything, even the legitimate events, that you just don't know where the lines are.
And I don't even think it's like the operative government. I honestly don't think it's like, the whatever, even the people that we see, like the presidents and stuff like that, maybe a few key senators. It's like, it's guys in the back rooms. And I don't mean like, the sort of stereotypical back rooms, but it's, it's people that are in places of power and money that do not need to be in the spotlight, So, and I'm saying this only because I don't think somebody, when people point out like, I don't know, Harry Reid or something like that as being some sort of savior or, really knowing what's up. I think that, these machinations that are being pulled are probably by people that are more like lawyers or executives, in whatever like black project this is, probably former military. I still think that, a lot of the private sector in terms of like essentially the private mercenaries, Blackwater and stuff like that have their tentacles in these things too.
I would agree. Totally.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing. I think, when they say, oh, look, the U.S. government has been investigating UFOs, of course they have. Like, and there's not just one program. There's probably numerous groups that have their fingers into this stuff. For various reasons. Some of it for disinformation, some of it for genuine research, some of it for just, hey, let's have fun with this and see what happens.
Yeah, because a 5-star general once saw something weird in the sky, and he grew an interest out of it. And after he got into a certain position in the Pentagon, maybe he's got enough leeway to say, okay, maybe you could start this little project, and I'll back you up, I'll defend you, but try to see if you can find me the answer to this thing.
Yeah. The Men in Black always puzzle me. Like, I'm really not sure what to make of the Men in Black.
Right.
I mean, sometimes they do seem like government agents, and sometimes they don't, and it's like, are the government agents copying them? Because they know it's part of the phenomena. But when like Tim and Josh's book, they're talking about a similar type of phenomena with Bigfoot researchers.
Yep.
Or witnesses.
I always found, in terms of sort of pop culture representations or reflections or imaginings of the Men in Black, for those of you, and I think both of you guys were big fans of the television show Fringe.
Oh yeah.
Their depiction of the Men in Black, which were essentially these interdimensional travelers, or they were from the future, weren't they? At the end, am I confusing my timelines? Yeah, big spoilers. I'm sorry, but if you haven't watched Fringe, just go and do it. It was great because it, incorporated all of these tropes into this really interesting, like, little stereotype of the Men in Black.
Yeah.
Which I thought was it was pleasing for me in terms of my, my interests.
Yeah, Fringe was good. Fringe was very good.
Yeah,
they did things like just to I probably didn't really explain sort of what it was, is that they were, they looked like human beings, there were all these men, but they were like bald, completely bald, hairless, and had these sort of pale skin. And they dressed in, suits that were out of time, and drove cars that were out of time, and did things like, when they would go out to eat at the diner, they would like pour the entire pepper shaker into their bowl of oatmeal and eat it, or something like that, or say things, weird things like out of time things, like what year is this type stuff. So the person, whoever had put together that Kurtzman and J.J. Abrams, I think, were behind it. Maybe had done their research.
I would say Abrams probably has an interest in Forteana. I mean, that's what got me into Lost, is some of the Fortean little nods that were there.
Right.
And it's like, so he's obviously interested in it. And Fringe was just a different view of that. Yeah.
And getting back to the idea of Men in Black, one of my favorite X-Files episodes is Jose Chung's From Outer Space. Not only because they showed Jesse Ventura and Alex Trebek as one of our Men in Black, but also because the writers try to show how perceptions can be altered in such a way that you cannot really get the full account of what happened by just interviewing one person. For example, and there are like characters in that episode that are totally convinced that Mulder and Scully are Men in Black. One saying that Mulder was some kind of like mandroid. That when he saw the alien, he actually screamed and said, "Ah!"
That's right.
Was a man wearing a wig, something that is totally ludicrous, but that was the perception of the guy. That's how the events happen according to him, and I feel that was very brilliant in showing how, with the UFO phenomenon, and maybe even the Men in Black, or when people that may or may not be from the government get involved, the witnesses are in such a like fragile state of almost like liminality, that maybe something that will be totally mundane for another person from an outsider, to them it's something totally incomprehensible. Like, oh my God, this guy came into my house and he ate like an entire bowl of oatmeal, and he put this, the pepper into it. Maybe that's what happened, but that's what they remember.
And it's also possible that you have government agents intentionally behaving oddly just to make it seem more ridiculous.
Oh, for sure. I remember reading in Greg Bishop's Project Beta how Bill Moore was toyed by Richard Doty and Falcon. Like they will arrange a meeting with him in some park because they wanted him to do something for them. And Bill Moore was talking to these guys, and then he will realize that all of a sudden he will see men wearing women's clothes walking near to him every 30 seconds or something. I was totally confused, what the hell is going on? And that was a test. That was a test that Falcon and Doty were running on him, so to see how he will react. I think that it's kind of like a gaslighting mechanism in trying to put the person into a very disconcerting state of mind, and that's when they are more manipulable.
Yeah, I think Valet talks about that in Dimensions too, the sort of meta logic sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like intentionally throwing people off in ways that don't make any sense, but also put them in that more susceptible state.
Yeah. One of the things they love to do, these government types, is if they say that they're going to meet you at a diner, at 8:00, and if you go at 8:00 sharp, and they are already there. That's like a kind of like a way to shock you.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how you, as another example, along with your very excellent one there, Miguel, would be Robert Guffey's Chameleo. And I know that some people, have their doubts about, or I have heard that some people have their doubts about the fictional versus non-fictional nature of it. But I take it at face value and as what, Guffey says, and think of it as, as being a non-fiction piece. And I certainly think that that's another excellent example of the weirdness of whatever's going on in some aspects of, deep intelligence.
Right. And there was what was that?
What did you guys explain it? What Chameleo?
Sure. So have you read Chameleo? I'm sorry. I made the assumption that both of you had.
I have not yet.
Yeah. Okay. So Chameleo, Robert Guffey, who is he's a professor at I want to say one of the California state universities somewhere out there. But anyway, he's been writing about weird stuff, Forteana, for a while, and he wrote this book Chameleo, which was actually first suggested to me by Adam Gorightly. He was raving about it. And I picked it up, and it's pretty great. It essentially tells this story of this experience that Guffey had sort of through and vicariously through his best friend, like from way back, this guy named, I think he calls him Damien in the book, but it's a pseudonym. Damien, he had a lot of problems with drugs and alcohol and addiction and stuff like that. And, but he always was like up to crazy stuff. He's one of those like totally insane dudes that I feel like all of us have known, for me at least, I've known, that guy who's like, that guy's loco. He's your friend, but you know that he's going to be the one that's going to do the weird thing. And anyway, so somehow it ends up that like Damien is at like has this like party house where people are coming in and out, and that there's this I guess he's a Marine that is AWOL from the local base, which was like one of the big Marine bases. He ends up at Damien's kind of like drug den, 24-hour orgy party, whatever. And he's got with him this new set of like unreleased night vision goggles and a laptop that's like a government laptop. And basically things go nuts from there. Damien, like, it's like, you got to get this stuff out of here. And what is it? Maybe you remember Seriah. Does he like keep the night vision goggles? Or he doesn't keep any of them, does he? I want to say he kept one pair, but I could be wrong about it. It's been a while since I talked to him or read the book. Yeah. And so anyway, basically what ends up happening is Damien ends up getting gang stalked by the military intelligence, CIA, FBI, we're not quite sure. And Robert Guffey, as his friend and sort of his, adoptive brother, kind of gets involved, and like, he meets some of these intelligence people, and there's these weird like conversations they have, and they talk to him in this really weird way. And, these things will happen like, I don't know if people are familiar with gang stalking phenomenon, but it's basically like when, you're walking down the street and all of a sudden, everybody turns around and they're all pointing at you or something like that. Right. Like weird things like that happening to kind of like drive you nuts. Very psyop sounding things. And so anyway, all this stuff just kept on happening to Damien, and this whole big story. I mean, honestly, people should just read the book. But it very much, it seems at the end that what was happening is that, or at least what Guffey feels like what was happening is that, yes, there might have been some actual incident that happened where like this kid left the laptop, but whatever the case may be, when the intelligence people got a hold of Damien, they kind of, even though he wasn't really doing anything, they kept on pressing him almost as like a test subject to see what they could do, like how far they could take it, and if these types of maneuvers or tactics would work. It's really interesting. And
yes, similar to what happened to Project Midnight Climax, which we know for a fact that it happened, which the CIA was using a cat house, a bordello, and the clients of that bordello as unwitting test subjects for their MK Ultra mind control experiments using LSD.
Yeah. Yeah.
So as far as Guffey goes, Guffey, I did a 2-part interview with him that you can find if you go back a couple of years. Chameleo came out in 2015.
Yeah, that's right. Of course. Yeah.
He hasn't really written much on Forteana. He's written a couple novels, and he has a book called Cryptoschatology, which is about called Conspiracy Theory as Art Form. So he's more into the
maybe that's what I was thinking
stuff.
about. Yeah. Okay. Conspiracy Theory as Art Form. There we go.
But that's not the only case of. There was someone who I got pointed to who was a DJ at a commercial radio station in Buffalo and was having some of the similar type of stuff happen to him with like the Glimmer Man suit, like people being invisible, stalking around him and stuff.
Right. That was the big thing around it that I forgot, is that it was like essentially a predator suit.
Right.
Like
right.
There was essentially, that was the big thing, is that there was this predator suit they were using to like gang stalk him, and that somehow Guffey had like met the guy who had invented the technology.
Right.
And when he ended up telling the guy who invented the technology these things that were happening to his friend Damien, the guy was like, "Oh, that's my tech. They've perfected it," or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this guy up in Buffalo, I was trying to get him to come on the show, but apparently he can't because his contract or whatever doesn't allow him to talk about, go on other radio shows because he's a DJ up there. But he said it was actually a private company that was behind what was happening to him. So, I mean, that's a whole nother aspect. It's not always the government. Sometimes it's private corporations that are developing this stuff.
The reason why Chameleo came into my attention is not because I had heard your interview with the author, Seriah, or that I had read the book. The reason why I learned about it is because the book is mentioned in the last of the Dr. Jacques Vallée's Forbidden Science journals in the number 4. Yeah, because I think that Vallée is trying to like make the case that maybe what is being proposed in this novel, the idea of and what we will call an active camouflage suit or active camouflage technology, which is basically invisibility, was probably maybe used or could be the answer to some of the events that happened around the infamous Skinwalker Ranch.
Ah, okay.
Okay, yeah, right. Yeah.
That would make sense.
Remember how the original owner or the second owner of the property, which was this guy Sherman, he once saw what could only be described as like a real life predator, like a big entity that wasn't totally invisible. Like you could see like his silhouettes, like contrasting with the rest of the environment, in like just like in the movie. If people want to know what I'm talking about, and 2 glowing eyes, just like in the movie Predator. So take of that what you will.
Right, and I think I remember Guffey saying something about the explanation for the 2 glowing eyes was that is your recent tech night vision.
Right.
Yeah, at least because that was something I believe that they saw as well.
Huh. Interesting. Yeah.
That active camouflage is real. To me, it's totally possible. Maybe it's still too costly to try like deploy a whole battalion of invisible soldiers, but maybe just a small tactics group with 4 guys using probably like $100 million suit. Why not?
Yeah. So, what does Vallee feel about Skinwalker? Does he think it was all like military experiments?
Vallee?
Yeah.
I don't think. No, he doesn't. He doesn't go into that direction. I think he tells us the events obviously like a journal, like a diary, like from day to day, and he lets you learn how he perceived the events as they unfolded.
Right. Yeah, I've read the first one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he doesn't really go that say, oh yeah, it was all just military experiments and like fooling people. No, he doesn't go that way. But I guess he's leaving these little like nuggets, like these little crumbles for people to try to continue the trail, because I guess with ballet that he doesn't always tell the whole thing. He doesn't come like 100% clean with everything he mentions. He leaves a few things still hidden, probably because he's trying to not only protect himself but also protect the identities of other people, like maybe personal friends or whatever. Like, for example, I remember Jack Brewer getting very hard on him because in that journal Vallée mentions that he actually acquired a government paper that proved, according to him, that the CIA did in fact conduct faked or staged alien abductions in Brazil and Argentina. And if you say that and you think, okay, faked abduction, obviously the most famous case from that part of the world is the Antonio Villas-Boas case that happened in the 1950s. And Villas-Boas himself claimed that after that happened, some people took him to the United States, and he said that it was because they showed him like different flying saucers, and they wanted to know which one is the one that looked like the one that he saw. But maybe, and this is something that Nick Redfern has written about, maybe that's all part of the mind control experiment that was being performed on him.
Right. He wrote about this recently, didn't he?
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
So one of the other things we were talking about was the idea that Red Pill, I think you brought it up, that ayahuasca could be looked at as a form of technology.
Right. Well, this is like my contention with people who take the UFO phenomenon from a very materialist technological point of view. Like I had a discussion with George Zukalos on Twitter, not because he knows who I am, but because just I responded to one of his tweets, and I don't even remember what started the discussion, but I kind of asked him if he thought that ayahuasca should be considered a form of technology, because the whole ancient alien things, and the reason why I have such trouble with it is because it's such a not only materialist explanation to this mythology from ancient cultures, their accounts of encounters with non-human entities, but it's also very kind of like dated sci-fi version of interpretation of those events. Like, oh yeah, you had to have the being that kind of looked like us, and they had to ride like something like a spaceship, and they had to land. And I even remember reading in the 1970s accounts from Eric von Daniken saying that the Alaska lines were, without a doubt, they were landing sites for these ships, because his rationale was, okay, the ships of these ancient aliens had to work exactly like the space shuttle, and the space shuttle need to land, and it's a lot of miles in order to manage to land. Okay, but whatever. Anyway, coming back to the ayahuasca, the answer that Zukalos gave me was that no, ayahuasca should not be considered a technology because ayahuasca is a medicine that comes from nature. And it was like, okay, so, I mean, aspirin also comes from nature, it's like derived from a tree bark.
Right.
So that means that aspirin is not technology. And he was like, no, aspirin is technology because, it was from nature, but using technology. And
Okay.
basically what I'm saying is if there's a machine or a factory involved, then you can call it technology. But if it's something like a few Amazonian Indians can cook by themselves using just a pot with water and fire, no, then that's not technology. And I feel
like he doesn't know the difference between what technology and industry are. Like he's talking about industry.
Yeah.
And I mean, maybe that's really too bad.
Yeah. To me, ayahuasca is a technology, is a form of spiritual technology. And this is something that
Absolutely.
we started to discuss in our Slack, whether the idea that can be something called like a spiritual technology that is not based on nuts and bolts or transistors or diodes or wires that needs a battery in order to operate. What if beings from other realms of existence can have machines that operate from a different level? And you could bring that idea to so many different areas. Like, for example, the whole wave of spiritualism in the 19th century began or was explained. The reason why all these people all of a sudden getting all these rappings and all these messages from quote unquote the other side is because the mediums were receiving messages that the dead were trying to actively communicate with the living using machines that were being designed by none other than Benjamin Franklin once he had died and once he had actually, started to work again on the other side, maybe after spending a few centuries just having a good time with, the ghost of Mary Antoinette or whatever.
So, I mean, where does something like Terra Preta fall in that category? Does that qualify as tech?
I bet Graham Hancock would say that. I mean, I feel like he even did in his most recent book, which I did a library read of. Graham Hancock. It's which is always gives you, if that's what you're looking for, it is full and cited and very well thought out. That Terra Preta was a technology. I mean, that was a lot of the argument that is going back and forth between sort of archaeologists in the field that are working with it and people that are I guess back at the academy talking about it, is that this is not some random the way that people I guess usually describe it. The working theory that the academy has is that it probably is just the leavings of certain people, whatever they had, these hunter-gatherers or whatever, they left their bones and their scat and all this stuff, and after a while it turned into this rich sort of compost. Well, no, it's a lot more complicated than that, and the people that really study it see that this is something that must have happened through trial and error using different materials until you got this very, very particular type of really like magic earth that's able to revitalize anything. And it's got dung in it, and it's got like shrimp shells and all different types of stuff in it. But this is absolutely a technology as far as what I would consider technology. Yeah. If you go from even like the Greek word technologia essentially means like the systematic treatment of a art or a craft or a technique. And that's completely it right there. That's technology, man.
And also the idea that we're also making this all this speculation and inferences about other civilizations, be that the Atlanteans or the aliens or whatever, based on our civilization. Like, for example, I think there was this new paper that was released in which people are proposing looking for early extraterrestrial civilizations by seeing how they might be able to use black holes in order to extract energy from them. And some people say, well, why will they do that? And of course, the rationale behind this is because the more advanced a civilization gets, the more energy it needs to consume. And there's a whole thing about the Kardashev scales of civilizations, in which the number one civilization is the one that is capable of harnessing the energy output of their whole planet.
Right.
In which case, our civilization is not even one. Yeah. It's not even a type 1. We are like type 0.75 if we want to be optimistic about it. And number 2 civilization will be the ones that is able to harness the energy output of their whole home star. Like, and that's when the idea of the Dyson spheres.
Dyson spheres, yeah.
The idea of a civilization so advanced that they would build this artificial bubble so that all the light from their star would not be lost into the vacuum of space. And if you go even further, the number 3 civilization will be the ones that is capable of harnessing the energy output of an entire galaxy. And now you're talking basically almost like living gods,
right.
The beings that will be able to do anything we can dream. These beings will be able to do it. But to me, all this is kind of like, we assume that civilizations will follow the exact same path that we are following. But what if a civilization is so advanced, so wise, that it realizes that there's no need to consume more resources than you need, in order to try to maintain a balance with nature? Like, for example, one example we could bring from science fiction is the Na'vi in Avatar.
Absolutely.
The Na'vi in Avatar are intelligent species. They live in harmony with the nature of their world, but we will obviously not be able to detect their existence through their technological signatures because there aren't any. So does that mean that they don't count, or does that mean that no, you only have to leave your planet like a dumpster and then move on to the next one in order to be qualified as advanced? Heck no. I feel that's actually a sign that you are not advanced if you are not able to clean up after yourself, and you have moved from place to place because you are leaving everything like a dumpster.
Yeah. I mean, that you could even go so far as to think about it in terms of, you mentioned consumption of energy. And if there was some sort of advanced civilization that was able to, rather than use energy in the way that we think of it, we think of, you have to consume energy in order to harness it and to essentially rip the life out of it and instill it into something else, or you use that energy to rip apart something and, put it back together, in the dead parts of it in certain ways. And that if people were to, and again, this I think goes into many wildly speculative ideas of what pre-Diluvian, antediluvian civilizations like Atlantis, Mu, what have you, or even, early Egyptian civilizations, is having these abilities that are considered advanced but exist in a different space, that are not reliant upon this sort of, the idea of exploiting resources. And rather than that, it's the idea of sort of working with the natural, working with whatever natural energies exist, some of which maybe are not recognized by most of physical science at this point, but do exist, and there is some proof for them, and even some scientific proof. And I think that it even could go far beyond that, into ways that we don't even think of, that a person could interact with their environment, even if that person was still a hominid like us. This isn't even thinking about what a completely different type of sentient life, how they might, create an advanced quote unquote civilization.
Like plasma intelligence.
There you go.
Right. Yeah, there's a book that was published in Mexico a couple of decades ago by a guy named Javier Velasco. He recently died from COVID. And he wrote a book called Regina. So which is kind of like a mythical interpretation of historical events that happened in Mexico in 1968. And what happened in the world in 1968 was 1968 was a pretty hectic year as well. The year of riots in Paris and riots, also student revolts in the United States. Like the whole world was waking up from some kind of slumber. And Javier Velasco wrote a fiction novel using that as a starting point. And one of the things about that was very interesting to me in that novel is that, for example, he goes to say that millions of years ago, bees, the insects, actually managed to create a very advanced civilization, but not in the way that we will, recognize it, because they were using chemicals and odors and things in order to communicate. Yeah. And obviously that's the kind of thing that we are not looking for when we are looking for signs of intelligence outside of our own. We want to see the same things that we will create ourselves. We're basically using the search for extraterrestrial intelligence is kind of like we're trying to put a mirror to try to see a really similar reflection of ourselves out there. But I think that what we will find instead is something that is so alien that, like you said, how will we be able to recognize it?
Yeah. Also, I want to point out with the Preta. Now I completely said it wrong. What is it? Preta Terra?
Terra Preta.
Terra Preta, that's it. Completely lost it there for a moment. We can't actually recreate that. And for that matter, would we have ever come up with the whole ayahuasca thing if it wasn't for the natives who, knew how to do it?
Oh, no. I mean, yeah. I don't know. Go ahead, RPJ.
It's the same way that we can't, rebuild the pyramids of Egypt the same way that the Egyptians built them. Why? Because we are not Egyptians. We don't have the same kind of yearnings, the same kind of aspirations, desires, mentality. It's our idea of modernity or of a truly advanced civilization is sitting in our asses all day and just pushing a button so that we get all we want without moving only moving a finger, but that's it. It's like the movie WALL-E. We're all gonna be like these biolargians, traveling through space, but all sitting in a bucket seat and eating chicken and just drinking soda. And to us, that's the idea.
It's me right now, man.
Yeah.
What was I just going to say to that? There was another comment I was going to make, and I've completely. Oh, no. To the other thing is, we literally don't know how to move blocks the size of some of the blocks in Egypt, or what's the other place with the really huge blocks that they built a chapel on top of?
Oh yeah.
I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah.
Or even
I came out there.
Or a lot of the audio effects you get in places like Malta and stuff like that we don't understand how they did.
Sure.
I mean, there is a technology there that is completely different from ours. We simply do not understand how they did these things.
Or just look at some of the even the architecture. I mean, honestly, go look at some of the palaces at Dvarka in or some of the sunken palaces off of Dwarka in India, or like go and look at any of the pyramids in Central America or in South America. I feel like even just the architecture, the complexity of it, the scale of it, like all of these things are immensely impressive just on their face, without having any sort of like special technology in it. And I feel like a lot of that kind of gets washed away, as there's something about like, in history, we used to be able to do these things because, I don't know, we had lots of slaves. And I don't know, maybe that's more human power is part of it, but I don't know. It seems like there are a lot of slaves, working slaves, building things these days too.
True. There's also that island in the Pacific. Oh, what the hell is the name of it? That's literally been built. Oh, I can't remember the.
Not Easter Island.
Huh?
Not Easter Island.
No, it's in Polynesia, I believe. And
an artificial island.
Yeah, that's ancient and was artificially built.
Right.
And I cannot remember the name of it, but it's one of those places where they just know nothing about it. I mean, Easter Island's another one that has a lot of weird, hard to explain stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
And the idea that it was a much bigger island at one point makes a lot of sense too.
Yeah. Yeah, there is an island in Mexico in the Yucatan Peninsula called Jaina. It's an artificial island that was built by the Mayans, and obviously nobody knows why exactly they actually had to do it. Why they had to devote, how many resources and man hours in order to create this island where they could put their little temple elsewhere, right? But I mean, these guys had to do things that way for a reason. It's like also the pyramid of Kukulkan in Chichen Itza is built right on top of a cenote, one of these natural wells of water.
Right.
And can you imagine if you were an architect and you were asked by your client, okay, you have to build my house, but it's right on top of this little lake? You're like, what? Are you crazy? Why will you want that? It's going to be a pain in the neck and logistically. And no, you have to do it that way because.
Also, that island I'm talking about is Nan Madol.
Nan Madol, right, yes.
Archaeological site adjacent to the eastern shore of the island of Pohnpei, now part of, I can't even pronounce, district of Pohnpei State in the Federated States of Micronesia in the Western Pacific Ocean. So it's and we don't really understand it.
Right. Yeah, the same way we don't know how the Australian Aborigines managed to travel to Australia, and I guess archaeologists think that maybe they just were like floating on a log or something, or a raft, and they just got lucky. But come on.
I think there are several texts that I think have made pretty good arguments for the really sophisticated maritime navigation of many cultures going back like tens of thousands of years.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not
that it was, and that's really like, we really just have to look at that to try to, connect some of these dots and have that as a possibility.
Yeah. And not only that, but humans as a whole, of one form or another, may go back much further than science currently accepts.
Right.
And we're always pushing those dates further back. And I mean, when you have a series of cataclysms too, the last of which we dealt with 12,000 years ago, that's pretty much wiped everything from that time period out. I mean, who knows how far it really goes back and where everything really is connected.
Yeah, just like Graham Hancock loves to say, and I can't believe he hasn't released a T-shirt with that slogan, "Stuff keeps getting older."
Yeah. And we're a species with amnesia.
Right.
Well, we're almost out of time. Chris, where can people find you?
You can go to brightrectangle.com, and that will take you to all the places to watch films made by me and my partners and do all that fun stuff.
And Red Pill?
Well, they can primordially find me at the Daily Grail, www.dailygrail.com. And Seriah, I would like to take this opportunity to invite your listeners, if they can, to try to support Greg and I on the Daily Grail through Patreon. We are trying to come up with more content, not only like in the sense of new articles, more articles in the webpage. We're also coming up with perks and gifts and rewards for Patreon subscribers as a show of appreciation. Like we're trying to come up with several ideas, like, I don't know, maybe books, like the ones that have been published by the Daily Grail publishing company. Not only books in our existing catalog, but also future books. There's a book that is about to come out, the latest book by Adam Wrightley, that Greg and I are in the process of finishing up the issues with the cover and that. And that could be one of the rewards. And other stuff, like maybe, I don't know, signed copies of Jacques Vallée book or whatever. The point is that the Daily Grail is one of the longest running paranormal-based webpage in the internet. It's been around for 25 years or so. And it's one of the pages that still maintains a great deal of respect and credibility, not only by the public at large, but also by like the big players in the field. You know, that people that you could easily recognize their name. They have a high respect for what Greg Taylor has been trying to keep doing. We need your help, guys. So if you can try to support us in any way you can, just $1 a month will be greatly appreciated.
I just as you were doing that, I went on and I signed up, because you're absolutely right. I will support the Daily Grail to the very end, and I really think that also the Daily Grail's been very good about you and Greg and everybody else who does stuff there, which I know is mostly you and Greg. I think in trying to keep people's heads straight amongst sort of the conspiracy paranormal meltdown that has kind of been happening over the past year or so. So it's great. I totally endorse supporting it.
And
Thank you.
Don't you also have absurdbydesign.com?
Yeah, I also have absurdbydesign.com, which and among other things, I design book covers, and also I'm available for commissions. Although obviously now that I'm trying to put more content for the Daily Grail, it will be an interesting juggling of my free time. Like unless I become like a night owl like Seriah and like sleep only like 3 hours a day.
All right. Well, thank you both for this.
Absolutely. Thanks, Seriah.
Thank you.
I want to take a moment here to thank all of my Patreons. It's because of you this show is able to exist. And I want to give a special shout out to those pledging $10 or more. Super Inframan, Allison Cook, Eric Hervin, John Blackburn, Ken Hunt, Chris Cordner, Dan Eckert, Tim, Jim and Sophie, Beverly Williamson, Joel Thomas Runyon, Empty K, Nagatha Christie, Patricia W., Barbara Fisher, Will Powell, Big Boy Limina, Craig Parmenter, Walker, Joanna Rojas, Maddie, David Moore, Vincent Treewell, Stone Wilderness, Luke Osborne, Becky Trainer, Rob Drummond, Alex Whitcomb, Edu Camouflage, Tactical Therapist, Janet Bunderson, 36 Dingo, Taylor, Sam Sharon, Jennifer Campbell, American Rambler, Kevin, Chris Ernst, Andy McNamara, Sedger, Dominic O'Malley, Riker and Stark, J. Otto Bullitt, Jose A., Charles Davis, Roger Gonzalez, Craig Cicernos, Ray Benedetto, Linz Jackson K., Alfred Tuttle, Kevin Schreck, Patricia Giaquinta, William Lovelace, Mark Brady, Ad Noctum, Carla Mahoney, and James Lattimore. Thank you all so very much. If you're a Patreon, there is the second part of the AMA show for this month that I recorded with Chris and Red Pill. That'll be up later in the week. If you want to become a patron, it's only $3, and it helps us out a lot. Go to wheredidtheroadgo.com and click on the Patreon link. You can always also just donate to the show clicking on the PayPal link. You can buy merch. You can look through the entire archive of shows. The entirety of this show is up on that website, going back to show number 1. There's a Facebook group. There's a Discord. There's all kinds of stuff. So go check out wheredidtheroadgo.com. Also, on a down note, my condolences to David Politis, whose son Ben, who has been on the show with him before, passed away last week. So that's not something any parent should have to deal with. But anyway, I will see you next time. You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange. You can always find everything Where Did the Road Go related at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And thank you so much for your support.